First, the headlines. The Sultanate reviews in Geneva its efforts in the human rights field. The United Nations and Pope Francis praised the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, which takes effect from today. And the novel coronavirus has killed at least 2.09 million people since December 2019. Those were the headlines. Now for the news in detail. As part of the Universal Periodic Review Mechanism of Human Rights Council in Geneva, the Sultanate's delegation reviewed the third National Human Rights Report of the Sultanate. The report recorded the work developments regarding enhancing human rights during the period from 2016 to 2020 within the constitutional, legislative, and legal frameworks. The participating states in the session praised the Sultanate's efforts in the field of human rights. The Sultanate's delegation was chaired by His Excellency Dr. Abdullah bin Mohammed al-Saidi, Minister of Justice and Legal Affairs. Forensics teams in the war-shattered Libya have discovered 10 more bodies in mass graves in a once militia-controlled town outside the capital, Tripoli. The government of National Accord said that 3 bodies were blindfolded and the rest bound, and the latest grisly found was at Tarhuna, 80 kilometers southeast of Tripoli. The United Nations had voiced horror when the mass graves were first discovered last June. Since then, more than 120 bodies have been exhumed there, including women and children, following the latest finds. The discovery last June came a day after the withdrawal of forces loyal to Eastern Libyan strongman Khalifa Haftar from the town. Israeli warplanes fired several missiles towards central Syria today, killing a family of 4, including 2 children, and wounding 4 others. The attack took place shortly before dawn when Israeli warplanes flew over the neighboring Lebanon. Israel has launched hundreds of strikes against Iran-linked military targets in Syria over the years. A Syrian military official said the attack was aimed at several targets and in the near-central province of Hama. It added that Syrian air defense units shot down most of the missiles. The strikes come amid intensifying low-altitude Israeli warplane missions in the Lebanese skies that have caused jitters among the residents. The Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons took effect today, but the milestone is marked by the lack of signatures from the world's major nuclear powers. Despite the missing participants, the occasion was marked by praise from the United Nations and even Pope Francis. The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres said that the treaty is an important step towards the goal of a world free of nuclear weapons. He praised the first multilateral nuclear disarmament treaty in more than 2 decades and called on all states to work together to realize this ambition to advance common security and collective safety. The treaty seeks to prohibit the use, development, production, testing, stationing, stockpiling, and threat of nuclear weapons. The White House said that President Joe Biden has proposed to Russia a 5-year extension of a nuclear arms treaty that is otherwise set to expire in February. Biden proposed the extension even as he asked the intelligence community to look closely into Russia's cyber attacks, its alleged interference in the 2020 election, the poisoning of an opposition leader, and allegations that it offered bounties to the Taliban to kill U.S. troops in Afghanistan. Russia has said for some time that it would welcome an extension of the New START treaty, which limits the number of US and Russian strategic nuclear weapons. The Trump administration made a late bid to extend the treaty, but its conditions were rejected by Russia. Still to come on News Bulletin. UK imams mobilized to counter COVID vaccine disinformation. Welcome back to the news from the Sultanate of Oman television. The novel coronavirus has killed at least 2.09 million people since December 2019. At least 97.46 million cases of the coronavirus have been registered. Out of these, more than 59.2 million are now considered recovered. The United States is the worst affected country with more than 410,000 deaths from 24.63 million cases. After the US, the hardest hit countries are Brazil with more than 214,000 deaths, India with more than 153,000 deaths, Mexico with more than 146,000, and Britain with more than 95,000 deaths. Europe overall has more than 687,000 deaths, Latin America and the Caribbean with over 564,000, Asia over 233,000, and the Middle East with over 94,000, Africa with over 82,000 deaths. France will have to resort to a strict lockdown like those in place in Ireland and Britain if it fails to rein in the more contagious variants of the coronavirus. Arnaud Fontaine, a member of the Scientific Council that advises the government on COVID-19 policy, said that they are keeping a close eye on the progression of the variant first detected in England, which has prompted Britain, Germany, and Ireland to reimpose lockdowns. France is currently enforcing a 6 p.m. curfew nationwide. The country has reported over 71,000 coronavirus-related deaths since the pandemic began. It's now at a 35% of its peak infection rate. French schools are still open and non-essential shops are allowed to trade. Germany today recorded more than 50,000 deaths from the coronavirus since the start of the pandemic, as public health officials express cautious optimism about a slowing infection rate. The Robert Koch Institute RKI Disease Control Center said that 859 people have died from the virus in the past 24 hours, bringing the total number of fatalities to 50,642. The RKI said it had registered 17,862 new cases since the previous day, bringing the total number of infections in the pandemic to more than 2.1 million. Germany survived the first wave of the coronavirus pandemic relatively well, but a second wave has hit Europe's biggest economy hard. Mexico's health ministry confirmed that 1,803 new coronavirus deaths, marking a record high since the pandemic began last year, as fatalities continue to tick up in the country with the world's fourth highest death toll. The previous record was set earlier this week with over 1,500 deaths caused by the fast-spreading respiratory disease. The additional fatalities bring the total number of deaths to 146,000. Like other countries, Mexico has begun rolling out its vaccination program, but at the same time, its ranks of infected residents continue to swell, some days by tens of thousands. Imams across Britain are helping a drive to dispel coronavirus disinformation, using Friday sermons and their influential standing within Muslim communities to argue that COVID-19 vaccines are safe. Qari Asim, chairman of the Mosque and Imams National Advisory Board, which is leading a campaign to reassure its faithful, is among those publicly advocating that inoculations are compatible with Islamic practices. Britain, the hardest hit country in Europe by the virus, after registering nearly 95,000 deaths, is relying on its biggest ever vaccination effort to end the repeated cycles of the lockdowns and restrictions. However, a report from the scientific community advising the government showed stronger mistrust of the vaccines among ethnic minorities than the rest of the UK population. Imams are pushing back in particular at fears among Britain's estimated 2.8 million Muslims that the vaccines contain substances banned by Islam. Among the falsehoods spread about the vaccine are it can be modifying DNA, make recipients sterile, or even involve inserting a microchip in the body. Oman oil price March delivery declined today by 42 cents to reach 55.14 US dollars. The monthly average of Omani crude oil price February delivery reached 50 US dollars, thus $6.17 higher than January delivery. The Office of the Wali of Bushehr organized a cleaning campaign at Ghala Wadi area in cooperation with Muscat Municipality and Bia Company. The campaign aimed at preserving the natural sites and cleaning Wadi's roots from any waste and protecting environment and greenery places, recreational sites. The campaign came within the framework of endeavor to enhance responsibility of all individuals of the society towards environment and instill on them the culture of voluntary work in the field of environment protection. This is the Sultanate of Oman television. Before we enter tonight's news bulletin, here are the main points once again. The Sultanate reviews in Geneva its efforts in the human rights field. The United Nations and Pope Francis praised the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, which takes effect from today. And the novel coronavirus has killed at least 2.09 million people since December 2019. With that, we come to the end of tonight's news bulletin. From all of us here at the newsroom and the studios, thank you for watching and have a good night.